1944. In Theresienstadt, 470 Danish Jews struggled to remain alive under the constant threat of deportation to their death in Auschwitz, or dying by starvation or disease. Only the continuing diplomatic pressure of Danish government officials and the food and medicine sent to them by the Danish Red Cross kept them alive. Nearly all of the Jews in the German-occupied countries of Europe had by this time been killed or were awaiting the certainty of death. Children were no exception. For 200,000 Jews in Budapest, Sweden served a vital role. Ambassador Per Anger recalls his experience in the Swedish embassy.
The Germans invaded Hungary in 1944, in March 1944, to force Hungary to act against the Jewish population. We reported to the Swedish government about the situation, and there were, of course, many people in Sweden, Jewish relatives to the Jewish people in Hungary, who came up to the Foreign Office asking for help. At the beginning then of during the spring, then in March, April, May, June, to save about a couple of hundred people that way. But then you see comes the new situation when we couldn't cope with that, because the people queuing up outside the embassy, the Swiss, the Swedish, the Spanish, Vatican, all that, increased in a fantastic way. So we were a small staff, we couldn't cope with it. So we sent for more staff from Sweden, and that is a time when Raoul Wallenberg comes into the picture. He was a great idealist, and he had been educated in the United States at the university there, and he sort of absorbed this American ideals of freedom and human rights. He came in July 44, when the whole Hungarian countryside has already been, the whole Jewish population, about 600,000 people, had already been deported to Auschwitz. So we concentrated our efforts to save those 200,000 Jewish people remaining in Budapest. The first thing he did was, when I received him there in July 44, and showed him what we had done, what I had sort of suggested to do with those certificates and all that, and the kind of provisional passports we had issued to some of these most, those people who had the most intimate relationship with Sweden and so on. That is when he creates the kind of protective passport. You see, he was an artist and an architect, so he designed that himself in the Swedish colors, big document, and with the ambassador's signature and the photo of the holder of the passport on it. Through the money he received from United States, we were able to rent or buy big apartment houses, and there they were lodged. And instead of having about 4,000 people there, we had in all secrecy, say, 20,000. That was the other side of his activities, namely his personal interventions. When he went to just the railway stations, he telephoned me one day and said, I am so busy to go to another station here. Could you go to that and that station, because I know there is a train leaving with Jewish people for Auschwitz. So I went there and went into the cars, and I told the German the same thing, that I'm a Swedish diplomat and here's my passport. And he was very polite then. And then I made the same thing. Are there any people here who have Swedish passports? There were only 2. And then I said, copying Raoul Wallenberg, but you must have forgotten the passport somewhere, or don't you have, don't you remember? I remember you were at the office the other day. Don't you have any paper showing that you have got the passport? And they understood, and they showed driving licenses or receipts and all that in Hungarian language, which the Germans didn't understand. And I said, okay, that's enough. That proves that you have a Swedish passport. And out I went with about 100 people then, and we put them into the Swedish houses. That is how he acted, and how I learned also to do the same thing. It was much worse after October than when the Hungarian Nazis took over, because they had no respect for Swedish diplomats or anything. They could as well have shot us as they were shooting the others. The last time I saw him, in the 10th of January, 1945, he came up to me. I was on the Buddha side of Budapest, and we always had communicated with each other. And we were going to see the SS general there in some errand we had. And the bombs were raining down, so to say, and there were dead horses and all that lying around. And I said to her, are you never afraid? Oh, certainly, I'm scared to death, he said. But I have to do this. We have to do this, because there's no other way out.
Many Danish and Norwegian prisoners of war and some Jewish prisoners remained alive in German concentration camps. A humanitarian mission was proposed to Swedish authorities by a Norwegian diplomat. Through secret negotiations with Nazi authorities in Berlin, approval was given to the Swedish Red Cross to bring Danish and Norwegian prisoners to Sweden. Swedish Count Folke Bernadotte led the first of a series of missions which involved over 300 Swedish soldiers, 36 buses and a transport ship. Other combined Danish and Swedish rescue missions followed. In this way, during the last months of the war, more than 20,000 concentration camp survivors, including all of the Danish Jews from Theresienstadt, were brought to safety in Sweden.
The RAF meet old comrades, members of Norway's underground army. And the citizens of Oslo, as those of every other liberated country, went mad with joy to be rid at last of the German invader. The British fleet sailed into Copenhagen harbor. Denmark is free after 5 years. 5 years of stubborn resistance and heroic acts of sabotage. King Christian arrives for the reopening of the Danish Parliament. With a democratic constitution, all parties are represented under the leadership of this well-loved monarch.
For the surviving Danish Jews who were returned from Theresienstadt, and the more fortunate Danish and Norwegian Jews who were able to return from their refuge in Sweden, it was the ending of despair and the beginning of hope. 50 years later, the Swedish Red Cross bus, the Danish boat, and the dedicated trees in Yad Vashem remain symbols of respect and gratitude to the men and women of Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, who rescued Jews during their desperate hour of need. We also recognize the Finnish government for assuring the safety of its Jewish community during the difficult war years. While the men and women we honor may not wish us to see them as heroes, perhaps they will allow us to honor them as decent people who choose to face danger with spontaneous courage and enduring compassion. For, in their words,
I have to do this. We have to do this, because there's no other way out.
It was obvious to me to take that job when I was asked to it.
People went out, risking their lives to help them, Norwegian and Swedes.
It's not heroic in what we did. We just did what was right.